Good morning and welcome to the Orange County School Board's work session, which has been scheduled today for the purpose of discussing the following school board policies: EBB, Accident Prevention and Safety Program; IA, Student Progression Plan 2022-23, and JIC, Code of Student Conduct. The public will not have an opportunity to participate in this work session to provide public comment because this is not a regularly scheduled school board meeting. No action will be taken, and there will be no pre-agenda period in which the public would normally address the school board on relevant topics that are related to the work of the school board. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. Let me take a quick roll call because we have one member not present in person. Let's begin with Vice Chair Gallo. Is Vice Chair Gallo with us virtually? Not at this point in time. Okay, she's trying to get in. Let's circle back. And Ms. Enval, if you get word from her that she's in, let me know so I can recognize her as present. Member Salamanca?
Good morning.
Good morning. Member Ferrant?
Here.
Good morning. Member Gould?
Good morning.
Acting as vice chair today. Member Felder?
Good morning.
Dr. Castor-Denel?
Good morning.
Member Bird? And
Good morning.
good morning. And myself. For anyone, for our new board members in particular, or for anybody tuning in, our not policy but practice is adopted by the board. If the vice chair is not present for the meeting, the immediate past vice chair assumes that role, and if that person's not here, it goes to the immediate vice chair, and if that person, right on down the line. So with that said, Member Gould will be serving in the capacity of vice chair in the event that I need to excuse myself. All right. I want to remind the board members that we will not be engaging in outside electronic or digital communication during the meeting so that we can focus on the meeting itself. And to my fellow board members and staff who may be speaking, please make sure to use your microphone and make sure it is turned on and speak directly in it so that our YouTube and Orange TV viewers can hear you directly. And also, I don't know that I normally say this, but it is very helpful for the new board members. It's very helpful for the public. If when you go to speak as a member of the OCPS team, if you will identify yourself by name and position, and that way not only our new board members but also the public has an understanding of who's speaking. With that, we will begin our meeting with a moment of silence and the Pledge of Allegiance, and I'll invite you to join us. Now for the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, our first school board policy is EBB, Accident Prevention and Safety Program, and I will turn to Dr. Vasquez to lead us from here.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As you stated, we have three policies today. We are going to begin with policy EBB. Kishara Cowens will take the lead.
Good morning, Chair Jacobs, school board members, Dr. Vasquez. I am Kishara Cowens, a staff attorney with the OCPS Office of Legal Services. To go over our agenda for today, we will be reviewing the timeline, summary of actions, proposed revisions, next steps, and there will be time for questions and discussions regarding each policy. Our tentative schedule: these policies were provided to Cabinet electronically. Today we are handling the work session, and the rule development workshop is to be determined, as well as the board approval date is to be determined, and the effective date will be upon approval of the school board. For review before the board today, we have EBB, Accident Prevention and Safety Program, IA, Student Progression Plan, and JIC, Code of Student Conduct. The first policy before you today is EBB, Accident Prevention and Safety Program, And so you all know this is the policy that governs our school safety specialist. And I will turn it over to Chief Brian Holmes in a moment. He serves as the district's school safety specialist. But before I turn it over to Chief Holmes, I did want to point out that matters of school safety and security are matters that are exempt from public disclosure. So if any board members have specific questions about a safety matter at a particular school or a concern that you want to raise, please let us know. We are happy to schedule a time to meet with you outside of the public meeting to answer those specific questions. At this time, I will turn it over to Chief Holmes. Thank you.
Thank you, Kishara. If you would, if you go to page 2, subsection 2. Oh, back up here. So the purpose of this is policy EBB is being revised to include updates required by the State Board of Education through the Florida Administrative Code. Revisions have been made to the existing policy language to include content, formatting, and terminology edits consistent with the Florida Administrative Code. So, if you would, go to section 2, subsection E. I'll read it into the record. Within 24 hours or as soon as practical thereafter, notify the superintendent or designee about any notice of suspected deficiency received from the Office of Safe Schools. If you go to page 3, section 5. Should I read the entire thing? Sure. It will be amended to say, safe school officers. All district schools and charter schools shall immediately, or as soon as practical, notify the OCPS District Police Communications Center if the safe school officer is not present on campus for coverage as required by section 100.12 Florida statutes. And that is the last amendment we have. Be glad to take any questions on that.
All right, board members, any questions on the information presented in terms of the changes? Any questions in terms of the policy in general? Member Felder?
One more question. I guess maybe clarification. Thank you, Chief Holmes. I understand what Ms. Kishara said about some of the personal kinds of concerns we have about safety, and I have the police here have been they have helped me when I had some specific concerns. But okay, I guess I'm asking about the time limit, or are there any time constraints when you are told some concerns about safety? How long will it take you to get to the superintendent? Or I guess the question I want to ask, it was dealt with when we had that situation at Jones at the game, and because I was there, and I notified the first person I knew to call, so I knew Amy wasn't in her office because I was at night, but I used to call Amy every time I got a problem. But I called Superintendent Vasquez, and she wasn't aware, but there were already 5 or 6 police officers in OPD, and she says, I haven't heard anything, so I'm asking about, I guess, the time. You might not be there because you're our district, police officer, and this was a Friday night of the game. We've already hired OPD to come. So I guess my concern was the time restraint, if there any, because as soon as I told Dr. Vasquez, she called me like maybe a minute or 2 minutes later and said, yes, we know. But that concerned me that she didn't know. That she wasn't, I contacted her, but she didn't know that was going on. Are you following what I'm asking?
I am, yes.
Because you said about, notifying the superintendent. So I guess my concern, or what I would like to just kind of ask, is there a barrier that keeps that from happening? Are you doing the best you can? If you are, I'm not here to complain, but I just want you to know, it frightened me that I had to call. I was going to call her anyway, but the fact she hadn't heard it. Usually when I hear stuff and I call, she says, Board Member Felder, we know we're handling it. But that situation, she didn't know, and I was running with my chair at 65 years old. So I'm just trying to find out. Tell me about that. Is that going to, how do we work that? If we have something like that again, or if it's a worst case scenario, and getting it to the superintendent in a timely fashion. So if a board member calls, she'll say, I know.
Yeah, so currently the process that we have for that type of notification is it's called into our emergency number. Is this turned on?
It's turned on, just bring it over so you're facing it.
407-317-3333. That goes directly to the District Police Communications Center.
Do we need to have that, or do you just give them the number? Who needs to have that? Dr. Vasquez, or do all of us?
No, the schools have that number.
Oh, they have it.
The schools have that number. It's in our emergency procedures.
Okay.
Safety and security procedures put out every year. They're familiar with it. They call in these notifications. I believe many of the board members receive these notifications as well. They're called in. The notification goes out. If it's after hours, like this particular incident was, then they'd be reaching out to myself and one of my police commanders. That notification is made, and then as quickly as possible, I'm on the phone directly with Roberto Pacheco, who normally briefs the superintendent on the details. We try to do everything we can. And I was en route to that particular event, calling in, trying to find out all the details I can so I
So
can.
you did hear it when it first happened?
No, no, I was at home
Oh, okay.
at the
Can I-
time. I was
can I
not at the game
clarify-
as
just-
you were.
Just to clarify, this isn't a conversation, so if we can let Chief Holmes answer, and then I'll go back to you. Thank you.
I'm trying to get
Oh,
the
I know.
clarification.
I know, but
That's
let
why
him-
I said that. I'm sorry.
Thank you. Chief Holmes?
So there'll be that information gathering stage, provide as much information I can, and generally, he briefs the superintendent shortly thereafter. So yes, there are some lag in that, but we're talking about minutes, not hours.
Member Felder, you're recognized.
Okay, and I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I'm
That's okay.
sorry, but I guess I was nervous slightly because the superintendent didn't know. And and as far as the experiences I've had, it's been very quick. We get notifications quick. But I just, in light of what we're dealing with right now in our district, I just wanted to know if that could be a little bit faster, but you're doing the best you can, and I thank you for it.
Okay, the superintendent wants to be recognized. Superintendent, do you mind waiting just a minute? I'm next up. One thing I do want to point out for the benefit of the public is that on the ground, the primary concern of law enforcement in a situation like that is the situation, as opposed to notifying the superintendent. Obviously, we want the superintendent and the board to know as quickly as possible, but we don't want OPD or the sheriff's office or any of our law enforcement taking their focus off of the situation on the ground so that they can call and notify us. Because the reality is the superintendent is not going to be able to resolve the situation. Nothing against the superintendent, but I do want the public to understand that there is the fact the superintendent didn't know it as quickly as we might like doesn't necessarily mean it's not being addressed. You were there on the ground. I can only imagine what that felt like, and I can certainly appreciate your concern about not knowing whether it was being addressed appropriately because you're on the ground. Yeah, exactly. Quickly, exactly. Superintendent, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I do want to clarify that on that particular evening, my phone had buzzed, and as I picked up the phone, the board member Felder was also calling, so I answered board member Felder, told her I didn't know. When I hung up with her, the text message had come through. I called, got information, and then responded back to board member Felder. Our system that we have in place has a backup as well. They call 333 3. Obviously, we're not always monitoring our emails, and so that's why we have a text message chain that either Mr. Pacheco or Dr. Armbruster initiates, whoever knows first, and then all of the cabinet members are notified so that we can take the appropriate steps.
Thank you. I have one question on the policy itself, and it's under section 6, subsection C. It's not new language. I'm sorry, it is on page 4. At least I think my version is the same as yours. Okay. And the language says, if the district school or charter school governing board fails to rectify the noncompliance, and I think this refers to any noncompliance, the school safety specialist must notify the Office of Safe Schools within 3 days of any instance of noncompliance not corrected within 60 days. I saw that, and I think that would also pertain to not having an SRO or the appropriate law enforcement entity on site.
It would if it went on to the following day. So if there's a non-compliance, a vacancy, for example, and they're able to remedy it by the following day, we would not have to make that notification.
Okay, and let's, again...
That's the way the rule's written.
It's not a conversation, so if you'll let me finish my question.
Sure.
And then I'll recognize you. The thing that concerned me was that we or the charter school board has to notify them of any instance of noncompliance not corrected for 2 months, 60 days. And that, it suggests to me that there could be a charter school that didn't have a law enforcement officer at their school for 60 days before we would need to notify. So this Office of Safe Schools, does this apply to having an SRO on property? You recognized?
It does not.
This,
That compliance, I would have to report if it was not remedied by the following day to the Office of Safe Schools.
and is that listed in our policy?
Yes, Madam Chair. If you turn to page 3 of the policy, section 5, subsection C, it says, if I may, the school safety specialist must notify the Office of Safe Schools within 24 hours of any deficiencies relating to safe school officer coverage and any instance of noncompliance that is determined to be an imminent threat to the health, safety, or welfare of students or staff. The notification must contain particularized facts beyond noncompliance with rule or statute that explain the imminent threat.
Thank you. So, Ms. Emval or Mr. Palmerini, lest there be any confusion about Section 6, which addresses noncompliance, and the section just read, I think we should clarify that the noncompliance in Section 6 does not pertain or override the need to report within 24 hours the lack of an SRO. I understand what you're saying, but the two of them don't necessarily comport and could be confusing. So thank you.
Thank you.
All right, let me go. Vice Chair Gallo is on the line with us, it appears. Welcome, Vice Chair Gallo. You're present.
Yes, good morning, Madam Chair.
Good morning. Do you have any questions for us at this time on EBB?
I do actually. And I'm trying to pull it up. I apologize. I am having connectivity issues. I'm in the Capitol. In the beginning of the paragraph, and this isn't something new, this isn't existing, but it talks about the school safety specialist, and it gives the superintendent the authority to appoint a designee or someone within the law enforcement. And as we had previously discussed at a previous work session, we had kind of intimated as a board that we really wanted that position to be held by a law enforcement officer. And since Orange County Public Schools is lucky enough to have our own police department, and I've talked to Amy and I've talked to John, so I don't know what the language would look like, but I would really prefer if in policy it shows that our intent, as long as we have our own police force, is for that position to be held by a law enforcement officer. I think that the magnitude and the scope of this position really warrants a law enforcement officer to be at the head of it or to be appointed.
Thank you. Who would anyone like to respond? Ms. Emball.
I can go ahead and respond. Under 1006.07 subsection 6A, the language in your policy specifically tracks the statutory language and says the school safety specialist must be a school administrator employed by the school district or a law enforcement officer employed by the sheriff's office located in the school district. If you want to go with Member Gallo's suggestion, I think you can. The authority is actually granted to the district school superintendent to choose, but you could, if you wanted to, school board, you could add some language that basically says, it's the school board's intention or that you wish the school administrator employed by the school district to be a sworn law enforcement officer. You could add that language if you'd like to.
If I can ask a clarifying question for Vice Chair, was your intent to make sure that it's understood that we are not going to use a guardian? Is that what I understood you to say?
No, Madam Chair. My intent really is that our school safety specialist be a law enforcement officer. I think with the duties that fall under that position, it's imperative that the person not only understand the lingo, but understand the complexity of holding such a position, especially in the times that we're in. And so I know that the statute says one thing, but as a board, we have previously gone above what statute says for the safety of our school district. So all I'm asking is that I don't want to take any latitude away from the superintendent, but I would like the intention from the board to be clear that position should be held by a law enforcement officer as long as one is available to us at OCPS. Versus another cabinet member.
Ms. Emball?
We can work on language, adding that in. So what's good about this work session today, this is the opportunity for you all to discuss with us what revisions you wish to see. And so I think that's totally appropriate. We wanted to get this policy done very quickly. So we can go ahead and add the clarification language that we said with respect to your comment, Chair Jacobs, and then we can also add the school board's intent with respect to our internal school safety specialist being a sworn law enforcement officer into this front section, and we can send it to you individually before we advertise.
Let me ask one question.
Mm-hmm.
So when we advertise, if we don't accept exactly what was advertised, then we start the process over
That
again.
is correct.
At the same time, if you send it out for all school board members to approve it, we have done that outside of
So
an open meeting.
If anybody
So-
has any concerns about it, we'd have to bring it back to a work session to discuss those changes.
Thank you, which is why I was going to ask at this time, it's not adopting the language, but does anybody have any concerns about the direction that Vice Chair has suggested? No, I didn't think anybody would, and I think it was a great suggestion. So, yeah, absolutely, send it out to us, but not for our approval.
Yes,
Thank you.
and if there are any concerns, we would have to just schedule another work session. So I think we can, we're pretty good wordsmiths, so we'll do the best we can to
Thank you.
put it together.
All right. Any other questions? No other questions? Superintendent, you're recognized.
She forgot to move her thing.
They said no other questions.
No. I mean, we're done with EBB, so
Thank you, Madam Chair. The next policy that we will be reviewing is policy IA, Student Progression Plan. We will have Staff Attorney Sarah Kopesky and Mary Bridges, Executive Director, Student Services, presenting.
Uh-oh. There we go. I apologize. Let me get there. Okay. Good morning. I am Sarah Kopesky, as Dr. Vasquez had stated. I'm with the Office of Legal Services. And with me today is Mary Bridges, who is our Executive Director for Student Services. we are going to be going over policy IA, the student progression plan, and I will turn it over to Mary to review.
Good morning.
That was this on?
Don't think it's on, but I could be wrong.
How's that?
Much better.
Okay. Good morning. The purpose of this, of policy IA, is being revised to update policy language and statute revisions. Revisions have been made to the existing policy language to include content, formatting, and terminology edits consistent with statutory language.
And please excuse me, this is a longer policy, so I'm going to scroll kind of quickly. I just don't want you to be staring at your screens and have it make you dizzy.
One of the first edits we're making, and this will be made throughout the entire policy, is we had to change the term Florida Standards Assessment, which is FSA, and we changed that throughout the entire policy to statewide standardized assessments. So you'll see that. We'll kind of scroll past that every time we see that instead of stopping each time. This is part of the Interstate Compact on Educational Opportunity for Military Children section. In the progression plan, we have an elementary section, a middle school section, and a high school section. And we're removing this portion out of the elementary section because it's concerning graduation, which really does not pertain to elementary. So in order to keep it more clear, we took out this entire section, which talks about graduation and high school items. And
It's the comprehensive career and education plan.
okay, so this is, and I believe, I'm not sure for pages, if you want us to, this I believe is we're at page 13. And this is also, again, because we have 3 sections, this is also on page 41 and 42. So when we get to that, I'll just repeat it. But this is basically for our CAPE, which is the Comprehensive K-20 Career and Education Planning. And this really also is just cleaning up the language. This section was modified to have the language match 1003.4203. The proposed revision reads, the district shall make available digital material, career and professional education, which is CAPE, digital tool certificates, and CAPE industry certification for students in pre-kindergarten through grade 12. And then we just changed the language to exactly the statutory language instead of summarizing, in order to enable students to attain digital skills. The digital materials, CAPE digital tool certificates, and CAPE industry certifications may be integrated into subject area curricula, offered as a separate course, made available through open access options, or deployed through an online course or digital computer. And then also with the CAPE, you'll see that we have removed quite a bit of sections. Again, this was just to clean up the progression plan, because that really has nothing to do with progression. That is just specific information about CAPE, and so it really doesn't need to be in the progression plan. So we wanted to make the progression plan more clear for parents. Page 16, 17.
What about this section here?
Let's see.
Oh, that's this. Sorry, that's this.
Yeah, this is again just changing FSA.
Sorry.
Okay, so page 16 and 17, this is the assessment, performance, and instruction support. This section was modified to align with the new statute language regarding progress monitoring, and to remove Algebra 1 EOC information from the elementary section. Again, as we were reading through, we saw that there was some high school content in the elementary section, so we wanted to clean that up. But we also were adding language about our new progress monitoring. So the new language reads, each student must participate in a statewide standardized assessment program required under 1008.22 Florida statute, and the coordinated screening and progress monitoring system required under this statute. Each student who does not achieve a level 3 or above on the statewide standardized English language arts assessment or the statewide standardized mathematics assessment must be evaluated to determine the nature of the student's difficulty, the area of academic need, and strategies for providing academic support to improve the student's performance. Also in this section, we needed to modify to include diagnostic assessment language pursuant to that statute. The proposed revisions reads, to meet the provision of statute 1008.25, a system of progress monitoring is to be used for students in grades K through 3 who show substantial deficiency in reading, writing, or mathematics as determined by various assessments. The added language is each student who does not meet district's specific levels of performance on the required assessment as determined by the district or who scores below level 3 on statewide standardized assessments in English language arts or mathematics in accordance with this statute must be provided with additional diagnostic assessments to determine the nature of the student's area of academic need. On section 18, reading assessment grades pre-K through K through 3, we needed to add some pre-K language in there. This includes the progress monitoring for pre-K through 3. And again, all the language, coordinated screening and progress monitoring, reporting requirements. Orange County Public Schools shall use the statewide standardized coordinated screening and progress monitoring system for the voluntary pre-K education program pursuant to statute 1008.25 for students in the voluntary pre-K education program through grade 2. The coordinated screening and progress monitoring system must be administered at least 3 times within a program year or school year as applicable, with the first administration occurring no later than the first 30 instructional days after the student's enrollment or the start of the program year or school year. The second administration occurring mid-year and the third administration occurring within the last 30 days of the program or school year pursuant to school board rule. For grades 3 through 5, English language arts, and grades 3 through 5, mathematics, the coordinated screening and progress monitoring system must be administered at the beginning, middle, and end of the school year pursuant to state board rule. The end-of-year administration of the coordinated screening and progress monitoring system must be a comprehensive progress monitoring assessment administered in accordance with the scheduling requirements under this rule. Page 21, number 19, promotion and retention, grade K through 5, section F. This section was modified to remove item F because item F was just a policy deadline for the 21-22 school year only. So that was something that was put in due to COVID, and so it no longer applied. Page 22, 20, yes, good cause. This is number 20, third grade retention and good cause exemptions on page 22. This section was modified to update the statute requirements to match Rule 6A-1.094221 for the increase in examples for the portfolio requirements for good cause exemptions. In the current policy, you needed 3 examples of mastery as demonstrated by a grade of 70% or above, and the new statute requirement is for each standard there must be at least 8 examples of mastery as demonstrated by a grade 70 or above. Page 25, the parent guardian notice and annual reporting of progress, which is section B of page 25. This section was modified to clarify reporting to the parent and guardian, as well as the new progress monitoring system to match the language. What we added in here, the current policy said the proposed revision states progress of the student toward achieving state and district expectations for satisfactory performance in English language arts, mathematics, and science on the statewide standardized assessment. The district must report to the parent guardian. It didn't say actually who we were reporting to in the past, and we wanted to clarify that we would report to the parent guardian the student's results on each statewide standardized assessment and the coordinated screening and progress monitoring system. Page 26, on page 29, actually, section 29, parent guardian request and student eligibility. This is talking about some acceleration, and again, we removed from this section to remove the credit acceleration program, which is known as CAP, from the elementary section, since it only pertains to secondary students. Page 30, when discussing the virtual school, the section was modified to clarify the difference between FLVS, or Florida Virtual School, and Orange County Virtual School, OCVS. Florida virtual school students will take statewide assessments at the school to which the student would be assigned according to the district attendance area. OCVS students will either test at the OCVS campus or at their zone schools. So OCVS students have the ability to either test with OCVS or at their zone schools, whereas Florida virtual school students would go to their zone schools. Page 32. Student eligibility for K-12 virtual instructions, page 31 and 32. This section was modified to align with 1002.455. The proposed revision is student eligibility for K-12 virtual instruction. All students, including home education, private school students, are eligible to participate in virtual education in any of the following virtual instruction options: school district-operated part-time or full-time kindergarten through grade 12 virtual education program. Under 1002.45, 1B, for students enrolled in the school district. Part-time or full-time virtual charter school instruction authorized under 1002.33, and this is the new portion, to students within the school district. Virtual courses offered in the course code directory to students within the school district. Florida Virtual School Instruction Services authorized under 1002.37, virtual instruction provided by a school district through a contract with an approved virtual instruction program provided under 1002.45, to students within the school district. So it's just adding all of the statute language regarding all the different ways students can get virtual education. Look at next 45. This, again, is the CAPE that we removed, so it was the same changes as we made to elementary. We're also making to the middle school with the CAPE. And 45, this is in the required curriculum section, and this is section G, which is discussing social studies. This section is modified to remove the school year the required curriculum began, as it is no longer relevant. The proposed revision removed beginning with students entering grade 6 in the 2012-2013 school year, because obviously we don't have any of those students still in our schools. Page 84. And this one I talked about. Removing all those. Yeah.
Ms. Bridges?
Yes.
If you could let us know what page you're on. For some reason, the version that we're looking at right now is kind of fuzzy on the screen.
Oh, okay.
So I'm trying to follow it on BoardDocs because...
We can zoom in a little bit.
Okay.
Thank you. Yeah, oh, thank you. Sometimes I catch it, sometimes I miss it.
Does that make
Thank
it
you.
better?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's
Sorry.
much better, thank you.
We got new guys and we're stereotyping.
So is this moving it to the appendix?
You want to ask? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
You'll notice in the middle school and high school section that there is a large number of pages added for the FSAA test. It's basically aligning the scores for the FSAA to the FSA. It's the conversion tables. We initially put it in the middle of the policy, but after review, we thought it may be better as an appendix, but we wanted to get the board's opinion on that because we thought it'd be easier for parents to go to the end as opposed to skipping through all these pages in the middle. So I'm going to scroll rather quickly, so please don't look at your screen. It may make you dizzy. You said 80? Yeah, it's a lot of
84.
pages.
84.
Okay. slow down, just make sure I don't miss anything. So this is a change that we already made. We already reviewed it.
Yes, yeah, that's, again, the virtual program, that's just in both sections.
Okay. And then 84. There we go.
This is section G2, Exiting English for Speakers of Other Languages program on page 84. The proposed revision for this section is to remove this language as it applies to high schools, and this is a middle school section. So again, this is discussing high school exit options. Page 89. Page 89 is the Interstate Compact on Educational Opportunity for Military Children. We're now in the high school section. This is section G on page 89. The proposed revision was requested by the School Choice Department, and they asked us to add a note, and the note is 4 of the 5 high school IB different schools, and so we wanted to clarify with magnet programs there are some prerequisites that they would have to be aware of.
Page 97.
Page 97.
Okay.
This is page 97 and section 15, assessment performance and the progress monitoring plan. Section D, again, this section is modified to replace the current language with updated language to match statute 1008.252. The proposed revision states high schools shall use all available assessment results, including the results of statewide standardized English language arts assessment and end-of-course assessments for Algebra 1 and geometry, to advise students of any identified deficiencies and to provide appropriate post-secondary preparatory instruction before high school graduation. The result of evaluations used to monitor a student's progress in grades K through 12 must be provided to the student's teacher in a timely manner and as otherwise required by law. Therefore, evaluation results must be provided to the student's parent in a timely manner. When available, instructional personnel must be provided with information on student achievement of standards and benchmarks in order to improve instruction. Page 100.
Page 100.
This is page 100, and it's number 18, grading scale and computation of grade point average, grades 6 through 12. This modification in this section is so that we can match current practice and be consistent with other parts of this policy. The program revision is to change talking about quarter 1, quarter 2, quarter 3, and quarter 4, and change that to report card 1, report card 2, report card 3, and report card 4. This is how Skyward talks about it, so we wanted to be consistent, and in our middle school section, it already had been changed to report card. Number 19, under final course grades, section A, page 100. The modification of this section removes in 2014, 2015, and beyond, since it is no longer needed.
What's the next page that you have? Again, you will see the conversion tables in here for high school, so I'm going to go rather quickly past those. What's the next page?
Page 125.
125. Okay. And we're going right up to page 125.
This section, it is a crosswalk of scale scores and course grades section. This is talking about the weighted graded scale. This modification was made to create a better understanding. We just felt the current wording was not as clear as it could be, and so the team reworded it. So now when talking about weighted, value, it states, weighted value for the following courses will apply to the scale below. Any course designated by the state course code directory as a level 3 course will receive the honors weight. This does not include courses with the level 3 in the course name, but still designated as a level 2 by the state. Grade values for the weighted scale are as follows. What that means is it could be a Spanish 3 course, or it could say 3 in the course name, but it's not actually at that level. The state course code directory provides you with a level of each course. So an A would be weighted 5, a B 4, a C 3, a D 1, and an F 0. Courses higher than our honors level: advanced placement, international baccalaureate, advanced international certificate of education, which is our ACE Cambridge courses, and college or career dual enrollment courses will be weighted according to the scale below. For students entering grade 9 in the 2006-07 school year, dual enrollment courses via post-secondary career certification programs will be given the same weight as the course described in this paragraph. Alternative grade calculation of weighting systems that discriminate against dual enrollment courses are prohibited. For these courses, an A is weighted as a 6, a B a 5, a C a 4, a D a 1, and an F a 0.
Do you have page 127 next? Or one? 129?
Yeah, I have 129. Yes.
My apologies.
Okay. So this is General Graduation Requirements section, page 129. Modification to this section removes the information regarding assessment of civic literacy to the course notation section. So basically, we took this out of this section and we're moving it down to section 25, which talks about course notations, because it's more appropriate to be in that section.
Which we will go there now.
So this is the course notation section, and this is where we moved that assessment about civic literacy. So basically, it's the same wording, just put into the course notation section. Also, in the course notation section, in section C, on page 132 and 133, we updated language to align with statute 1003.453, beginning 2021-22 school year. School districts are required to provide basic training in first aid, including cardiopulmonary resuscitation for all students in grades 9 and grade 11. Instruction in the use of cardiopulmonary resuscitation must be based on a 1-hour national recognized program that uses the most current evidence-based emergency cardiovascular care guidelines. The instruction must allow students to practice the psychomotor skills associated with performing cardiopulmonary resuscitation and use an automated external defibrillator. When a school district has the equipment necessary to perform the instruction, private and public partnerships for providing training or necessary funding are encouraged. And that's straight from the statute 1003.453. 133, the online course requirement. Also in this section, in section G, we just updated, again, we just kind of cleaned up the wording where it did say grade 6, grade 7, or grade 8. We changed it to just grades 6 through 8 fulfills the requirement. And then after we mentioned Florida Virtual School, we did put FLVS so that we could call it FLVS further down. 138.
And just to note, if you see some of these red lines that we're going by, it's either a statutory update or just like a formatting edit, so I don't want you to think that we're missing anything substantive.
Page 139, I believe.
139.
Yes. This is the standardized high school diploma designations, and this is talking about the scholar designation. And again, this is just sort of a correction in how we are writing it. This section was modified to remove item I, which says the ELA requirement. It says, in addition to the requirements of 1003.4282, and ELA is in that requirement, so that's sort of, we're double stating ELA, because this says this is in addition to that, and the ELA is already in that section. So we just removed that first section. 140. Right, future is 140. Okay. On page 140, number 31, this is the Florida Bright Future Scholarship Program, and this was a change to the legislation last year, and it's discussing the volunteer service hours instruction. So this section was modified to include the ability to use paid work along with volunteer hours. In the new section, it says the student must complete a program of volunteer service or beginning with a high school student graduating in the 22-23 academic year and thereafter, paid work as approved by the district school board, the administrators of a non-public school, or the Department of Education for home education program students, which must include 100 hours of volunteer service or paid work. 149. This is on page 149, and this is number 43, which is eligibility and procedural requirements, principal determined and district determined. This is for acceleration. The state requires us to have acceleration programs and process for students who want to accelerate their learning. And the current policy had stated that no less than 2s in conduct in the current school year at high school. And our current practice, we really do not look at conduct at all with our current practice in the high school. So we removed that item because at high school, if they're accelerating, we allow them to accelerate strictly by how they're doing in the coursework. 160. Okay.
So you're going to see a lot of red line here. This is something that Ms. Bridges already went over with the FLVS students and the virtual instruction. But again, it's in the high school section this time, so it was updated there as well.
This is, and this is kind of backwards because Section 5 comes first, but basically we were switching a statement from Section 6 to Section 5. This is the requirements for a standard diploma for students with disability via access points. And this statement is students must take the statewide standardized alternate assessment for associated courses, and these assessments will count as 30% of a student's final grade as determined by the student's teacher. And that was in the, we changed it from Section 6 and took it out of Section 6 and put it into Section 5. This was made because the assessment indicates the alternative assessment for access points. So it should have been in the access point section, which was Section 5, and not the non-access point. I don't know if I said that clearly.
So 162 is...
On page 162, this is number 8, the general requirement, special diploma for students with disabilities entering the 9th grade. In 2013-14 and prior years. Again, we removed this because it no longer applies to students in our schools. All of those students will have moved on by now. 168. On page 168, 10, the course credit section. Again, we removed this section because it no longer applies to students in our schools. It's discussing students who began ninth grade in the 2013-2014 school year or prior, and they're all no longer with us, so we removed that section.
175 is
Yes, 175.
we're getting there.
Yes. Number 9, adult English for speakers of other languages on page 175. This section was modified to update language to provide clarity. The revision states adult ESOL is designated to support immigrants and other individuals who are English language learners in the following skills area: reading, writing, speaking, listening, comprehension, and mathematics. The program is also designed to foster an understanding of the American government, individual freedom, and the responsibilities of citizenship. This program is also designed to lead to students' attainment of a secondary school diploma and transition to post-secondary education and training or employment. This is in our adult education section.
And that concludes our presentation of policy IA. Actually, I'm going to keep that up.
Let's begin with Member Gold.
Keep that up in case.
Thank you. I know that was a lot of changes. I have a couple questions. I'm going to start backwards. On ESE students who have a severe learning disability, and it says they must do X, is there still a waiver ability for students who physically just cannot perform a test or are medically homebound for the assessments?
So we have two different graduation options. We have the access points and the non-access points. If they're on non-access points, they are required to take all the required tests for graduation. However, and I'm not an expert on ESE, but I do believe there are ESE waivers that can, through your IEP, be discussed.
I'm thinking of a particular instance that we had a few years ago with a young man who was bound to the Russell home who only had a brain stem, and we had to do a lot of advocating with the state to let him get a waiver because he really couldn't do the assessment. So, and it was very difficult on the not-for-profit that was caring for him. So I just want to make sure that mechanism's there, and if it's not, then it may be something we need to educate and do a legislative remedy or try to seek it.
Let me recognize the superintendent.
There is a process in place for us to petition the state for extreme circumstances.
Okay.
And I do believe that, and I remember the case, it's gotten much easier to do that. So, yes.
Because it became a community-wide effort
No,
of
I remember
advocacy.
it was.
And then this is not so much about what's in the policy, but how we support it. What is our current standard for making sure that grades are updated so that parents can see it in a timely manner?
Who wishes to answer that? Superintendent, you're recognized.
So we do not have a standard practice in place. The recommendation and the practice that is at many of our schools is that the grades are turned around within a reasonable amount of time. That's usually 24, 48 hours. However, we have heard, and I have heard in recent town halls, that sometimes grades get posted right before the progress report goes out, or the report card, and so we can work on standardizing that process. However, we need to be mindful that teachers do have some discretion within the grading policy and what's in the contracts, but we can definitely work on that.
So this has been an issue since my kids have been in school, and I had one who didn't like to do homework, and I didn't always know that he didn't do his homework. This is a real hamstring, and I'm wondering if we should, it may not be appropriate in this policy, but if we should actually create a policy that requires that grades are put in within a 48-hour period, or whatever that time should be, 72, whatever it is that is reasonable for teachers. And I'm not a good judge of what the reasonable is, but it's when we're looking at such an aggressive assessment standard coming to us, and everything really snowballs based on an information exchange of where that child is, especially if they go for the portfolio component. You don't want to be scrambling at the end trying to create that portfolio, or a parent trying to make up for it.
Superintendent?
Right. So I would want to have conversations with CTA to get a clear understanding of some of the challenges first that teachers are facing, maybe why the grades aren't being uploaded. It is, again, it's part of the working environment, and so I do believe we can have conversations to identify what are some of those obstacles and maybe come up with some recommendations. I'll defer to John Palmerini if we're, in an area of bargaining.
Mr. Palmerini, do you want to respond?
Not really.
Is it on now?
It is.
Okay.
Let me rephrase that. Will you respond?
Yes. So this is a very, very close area as far as bargaining. Our current contract says that our teachers will grade in accordance with district-wide policies, but if you start putting requirements on grades shall be inputted within 48 hours, 72 hours, I would sure that it would at least impact bargaining, and it may even implicate having to directly negotiate that, because that could be seen as a change in working conditions, which we'd have to bargain. I have to look at that to see if there's any case law on point, because I'm not familiar with any as I sit here today, but that is a complicated collective bargaining issue.
Member Gould, your 5 minutes is up.
Okay.
We'll circle back around,
Yep.
okay?
I'll
So-
punch it again.
Punch yourself back in. Thank you. Member Ferrand.
Okay. Thank you so much. I appreciate you guys taking the time. If we see little grammatical things, like missing word or whatever, I can just email you those, right?
Yes, that would be fine.
I won't bore anybody. They're just whatever. Okay, so the big one was on page 125 about the weighted grading. So I had a parent reach out to me whose child is in a magnet program, and she was saying that the magnet program, those courses, are graded the same as an honors level course. However, she said that those courses are significantly tougher than any honors class, including AP classes that our child has ever taken. They're very rigorous. And so I'm wanting to see, is there a way we can weight those magnet program grades in high school? I guess it would be, I don't know if it matters in middle or elementary, but especially in high school to get that GPA up. She was saying, for instance, because those grades are different, she said, I don't believe our kids would ever become valedictorian or things like that, because now your grades are, it's as if you've just taken honors level classes. So I don't know if that's something that we can discuss or how that even comes about, but.
Ms. Bridges, you're recognized.
Yes. So the way the DOE levels courses is, again, an honors course would be that level 3 course. What we'd have to look at the magnet program is what course code they're using, and see if it is a honors level course and they're going towards those standards, then it should be graded as an honors level course. If they are actually teaching above the standards or teaching something that is more rigorous, we might want to look at the course code they're using and see if it would be more appropriate to be using a post-secondary course code or a dual enrollment course code or something that could be used as one of those higher levels. I don't think we could start differentiating between FDOE honors courses, but I think we could look to see what's actually being taught and look at the standards and see if there would be a more appropriate course code.
And so that's something that I would go to the talk with the school itself, like the magnet, or is that something that?
Dr. Vasquez, you're recognized.
So if you will send me the information, we can reach out to the school and they can take a look at the course.
Awesome. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Member Front. Member Felder, you're recognized.
Thank you so much, and thank you for the report, and guys. It's quite tedious, so thank you. I have a question. It was brought to my attention by a teacher in first, I think they teach first grade or second. Anyway, page 21 about this retention. And some members of my community, they've really had some concerns about the retention, the fact that why they can't retain. I looked at the policies and what we were saying, that is there why we can't retain the kids, and I know that last year when that was discussed, when Dr. Jenkins was our superintendent, that she talked to me and said that sometimes it does something to their self-esteem when you retain them, but if they don't have the knowledge, if they can't do it. And I was, as you all were making your presentation, we were looking at the scores that they have to have and so forth to move. I remember so well that RC one, when I was doing my grades and so forth, and the time it took to go through that, and sometimes computer glitches come in and you can't get the grades in as quickly as you'd like to. But let's go back to page 21, section F. I just want to maybe I need some little clarification, because teachers, by the time the students get in the first FSA test, then of course by the time getting 8th and then 10th grade, the reading level is just so below. And I mean, could you talk to me about that, just a little bit about how we can handle that?
Sure. So just to clarify with what we removed, letter F, that was something that the state, they wanted to make sure that because of COVID, if parents wanted to retain their child, they could easily request that retention. Again, that was just the request. Retentions are always made through a school team where you have the parent and the teachers and the school team looking at that request for retention. If you're talking about before grade 3, so K 1, 2, if parents have a concern about their students' their child's progress and those type things, all parents can call a school team meeting, and that team looks at all of the information. Normally they'll have a psychologist in there to look at developmental, and that team makes that decision.
Yeah, because this particular teacher, had a concern that they were being told, you can't retain it. She clearly knew the child needed retention. So, all right. I think basically, okay, on page, anybody, am I right? Anybody want to say something, Doctor? Is that okay? Can they retain the kids if the parents want them?
Superintendent?
So there is a process that we put in place when we look at retention. There's lots of data that we look at. We do look at the development of the child, progress that they've made. There is research out there that supports, and I haven't looked at the data post-pandemic, but if you retain 5 children, 2 of them after 3 years are right back where they were prior to the retention. 2 actually regress, and only 1 child benefits from retention. Again, this is pre-pandemic. I haven't looked at the research post. So a parent certainly is part of that decision, and we sit at the table, but we want to make sure that we do our due diligence, that the child's retention is in the best interest of the child and not for other reasons. And we have had some situations where the children are actually above grade level and the parents want them retained. And that's a situation where the school, unless there is some significant reason, would probably not be in agreement with that retention.
Okay, all right, in page 22, the 8 examples of mastery. What if after you've taken this child through all of those steps and they still don't get to the mastery? What happens?
This section you're referring to is the 3rd grade automatic retention. So if they don't get a certain score on those statewide testing, they need to be retained unless they meet these good cause exemptions.
Okay.
So all of these are the ways that they can show, aside from the state assessment, that they're okay to be, that they have the ability to move on. So if they did not meet any of these good cause exemptions, then they would need to be retained that year.
All right, okay, thank you.
Thank you. A couple of questions of follow-up to Member Gould's questions about waivers for students with exceptionalities. It was explained that there is a process by which we can petition the state. Dr. Vasquez, does it make sense to reference that in our policy so that it's clear that we aren't completely limited by what else is in our policy? Or is there a reason not to?
So I would want to be very careful including that language in our policy. We do have families that are not aligned with state assessments and prefer their child not take any assessments. And so I don't want to give the indication that this is something that's easily attained. There is a process, but honestly, it's difficult for them unless it's a situation like the one that we mentioned before, that the child really is significantly incapacitated. And again, so I personally believe that putting that in the language may cause us more of a problem with parents believing that there is an out, and maybe frustration on their part when they, try to petition and the response is no.
Let me, I appreciate what you're saying, and that makes a lot of sense. Let me reverse it just a minute. And what I want to do is I want to make sure that there's nothing in our policy that precludes us from doing that. So I would just ask staff, as you go through this, just look at that carefully and make sure that we have not boxed ourselves in to where we couldn't in an extreme case. And then the second thing, well, actually, I had 3 things, probably won't get to them. The second thing was the concern that Member Gould raised about the notification of how students were doing and the time lag. And I don't remember where it was, but I could have sworn that as I was going through these policies, that I saw something that I thought the state had required, you'll have to help me with this, that requires the students and their parents to know if the student is not progressing and within some period of reasonable time. Does anybody recall what I might be referring to? I'm sorry to be so vague.
Yeah, I'm going to refer to my director of K-8 because she sends out to the schools. There are notices that the schools need to send parents when there are deficiencies. Carla, can you talk to it a little bit?
As I'm hoping that that language that I saw might address the issue without it necessarily being a bargaining issue.
Hello, my name is Carla Owens. I'm the Director of Academics K-8. We do send out notification letters We send them out at the end of the second quarter for those students who are in need of possible retention. Also, there is language that states that, of course, that we have to give timely progress or timely submission of progress every quarter. So we do that with, of course, our progress reports and our report cards. There is statute language that refers to that.
Thank you. That's probably what I was referring to. That's probably not completely sufficient for what Member Gould was addressing, but I wanted to recall for myself what that was. One other question I had on page 149, I'm sorry, I was a little confused about the taking the conduct out. What is it the state requires?
So the state required, it's called the Excel program, ACCEL, and they required that schools have, or the districts have, a process by which students can and parents can ask to accelerate. So take higher level courses, skip a grade, all of those type things. And within our processes, in an elementary and middle school, sometimes if they do skip a grade, conduct and discipline may be taken into account, attendance, all those things as we're having those team meetings. In high school, really with acceleration, because acceleration is not whole grade acceleration, it's really just taking accelerated courses or higher level courses or taking CAP to, CAP out of a course. Conduct really isn't a portion of that decision making, so we wanted to take that out.
Okay, thank you. Let me go to Member Byrd.
Thank you, Chair. I have a few items. I'll start with compulsory school attendance on page 11. As we all know, we've been having a lot of issues with school attendance. So I don't see anything in here that talks about what follow through we have or anything on our end that we can do as a school district when they are not attending school regularly. It talks about, ending school enrollment and, terminating school enrollment after 16 and all that kind of stuff. So I'm just wondering where we have that, or if that's something that we should have in here or that could help with our attendance issues.
Superintendent, you're recognized.
Mr. Moody is here and can speak to it. There is some language in our attendance policy, and he can. We were just having conversations about this a few days ago.
J.E.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Great question. So, yes, student attendance policy JE speaks to that, Member Byrd. We'll speak to the attendance, habitual truancy, and what schools can do if kids miss a certain number of days within 30 days, 90-day period. Letters are to go out to home. Social workers are involved, and the child study team at the school level is invoked, and they get involved along with the parent. And the counselor was just telling me they've filed 6 petitions this month for truancy. So truancy court is back up and running, and they're in full gear. So yes, we've been battling with since pandemic. Attendance. Kids have gotten out of the habit of attending school. Parents may have gotten out of the habit of sending kids to school. So we're working diligently to get kids back in school and keep them in school.
Thank you. And so we don't need to have anything in this section where this talks about compulsory school attendance, addressing that, since we have that other policy.
If the board would like, we can actually add a reference to policy JE in this section, so that way the reader would know. And I don't know who it was from Ms. Bridges' team who entered all these hyperlinks into policy IA, but I was amazed by it. I think that's great. So I think we add a hyperlink to JE as well. so that way parents can just click it and go directly there for more information.
That's a great idea. Thank you. And along those same lines, and this might be in the other policy, and forgive me if it is, if a student is absent a huge number of days, like we heard at town halls, there's some kids that have been out like 60, 80, 90 days. Does there come a point where they will no longer be on our attendance rolls, or they are not part of our student body anymore?
Ms. Kopesky, you're recognized.
Thank you. So there is a procedure in place for students who don't attend schools, and it starts with letters home, and then they have what's called an attendance warning conference. They do an ACST meeting, which is a attendance child study team meeting, and they meet with the parent several times. Once it gets to that point, it actually goes to Ms. Corin's office, and she reviews it with Dr. Levi, who is our senior director, I believe, or senior administrator over student advocacy. They look through all of that information, and then they would file a truancy petition at that point if it meets the criteria. I don't believe that a student is ever withdrawn due to attendance purposes. They would remain enrolled, and then we would proceed through the court process.
Okay. And is that a state statute issue, or is that our policy issue as far as them not being withdrawn?
Can I have Ms. Corin come up and answer
Of course,
that for you?
please.
Thank you.
Good morning. So there is a section of time where if a student does not enroll in the beginning of the year that we will withdraw a student. However, if we know once they do not enroll that they aren't enrolled somewhere else, truancy could also apply at that point. But once the student has gone through that DNE window and they have attended for a certain amount of time during the year, they are enrolled in our schools. So at that point, we cannot withdraw them, because if we withdrew them, then we wouldn't be a party to the truancy petition. So we need to make sure that we keep them on our roster. That also comes into play with students, with special needs, et cetera, because we cannot withdraw them. We have to make sure that their education is available to them. However, once it goes into the truancy process, the judge generally orders for the child to go to school, to, complete all of their work, and if they don't, then sanctions are entered for the parent and the child. So we are working with our school social workers right now. There is the process that Ms. Kopesky just explained, and once they go through that process, the information comes to Dr. Levi and myself, and then we file those truancy petitions. So we anticipate now that we are at this time of the year that we will probably have more of those. We are just, as they come in from the school social workers, we file them, and then we try to get the judge involved to get the students in school.
All right.
Thank you. I just want to say, it's not because I'm insensitive to the fact that we have to educate. My concern is for our teachers who are held accountable for these students that are on their rolls that are not there all year. So that's the concern that's been brought to me by teachers. So thank you.
Member Byrd and board members, I misspoke at the beginning of this meeting, and I wanted to apologize to you. Our previous vice chair was Member Byrd. Yes. Well, very kind of you, but I apologize. I apologize. But on the good idea about incorporating, I think it's JEC, for the record, I think that was your idea. So good idea. Trying to make up. Okay, Member Castrodeno, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I wanted to just address a couple of the topics that have been brought up. One is the one that Member Gould brought up about the putting the grades in promptly. And I would like to caution us putting in any policy some hard, fast time frame without doing something where we're looking at the increased demands on teachers. So I understand as a parent, you really want to be able to keep up with your child, but it might be helpful if parents go in and help and volunteer in the class, because the workload every year, it gets more demanding. So it might add to it might even add to their stress level. It might be the straw that breaks the camel's back and they're out. So any grace we can give, I think we should try that. That doesn't mean that we don't recommend that grades get posted promptly, but in the upper grades, when you're dealing with writing assignments, it takes a long time to go through those and give feedback and grade them and then put them in, make sure there's no technical difficulties with posting. So I just want us to be aware that there are a lot of complicating factors for that. The second issue is the issue regarding some of our more fragile students and taking standardized tests. When I was in the legislature, that was one of the bills that I passed, was making sure that students did have a way to petition or have an exemption if they were in, if it was physically or for whatever reason they could not take it. And that also teachers would not be held harmless would be held harmless because a lot of times parents had already decided their child was not going to take the test. But with that decision, teachers were often still held to account. So I'm not sure what the status is now of that legislation, so I wonder if Mr. Palmerini can find that in the education statutes and let us know what that looks like sometime. All right, thank you. And that's all, thank you.
Thank you, Member Castor-Daniel. Since Mr. Palmerini has an incredible memory of every aspect of the education code, perhaps he already knows. Don't want to put him on the spot, but just in case, I wanted to give him the opportunity.
I'm going to take a pass on this one for a second and look it up.
All right, not a problem. Nobody expects you to have it, but you've always impressed this board with your memorization. So let's go to Member Gould.
So thank you, Member Castor-Daniel, because that was going to be before I ran out of my time. You know, I absolutely recognize that there are so many burdens on our educators right now that in so many levers that they have to pull to do their job. How do we, and this has been an issue since I've been on the board, but I feel like we're in that status of crazy, right? We keep doing the same thing every day and expect a different outcome. And the core of what we want our teachers to do is to help every child succeed. And the core at that is being able to make sure that they have the most up-to-date information, they and their parents have the most up-to-date information on the status of their education throughout a year. And I had always hoped this would get better through a lot of the things that we've tried to do in peeling back unnecessary assessment and benchmarking and all that. We have a long way to go to free up the time to be able to let our students do that. But if we are hitting that second semester in that junior year, it's too late. It's too late to catch up. And that's the problem. So that if you're not, if you don't have that family on board, and I absolutely agree, more parents in the classroom, more tutoring, but you got to have the timely information to know what you're trying to remedy at the same time. It's not all on the staff. But it becomes too hard to try to catch it up because you really only have one semester before you're going into testing season. And it's not enough time. You know, I always throw my oldest son under the bus It won't change now. He was a very smart young man who didn't like anything traditional in education. He says he has ADD. We have a discussion about that all the time. But he ended up passing the AP test with a D because he didn't turn in the homework. And by the time we really realized how far he was behind, we didn't have all the information going in. And as a parent, had I known then what I know now, I would have told him not to take the AP test. But he had the information but got dinged because he didn't turn in the homework, but he had comprehension of the information. So, there are circumstances that still are popping up like that, sadly. And you could take that from AP all the way down to the basic learner. If you don't know what you don't know, it's hard to help them in the home. So, I am not wanting to burden our educators anymore. I want to make that clear. But how do we plow the field to make it easier?
Dr. Vasquez, you're recognized.
Sure. So I want to clearly state that the vast majority of our teachers are, submitting grades on time, and there are no issues. We have heard from parents that the grades are not in on time, and I think Member Gould's point about educating parents, some of them still don't know how to access access the portal so they can look at their child's grades. And so that's something that we've seen some of the schools, some of the high schools that have had special sessions for the parents to come in and they walk them through. So I think that's something we need to be able to do at all levels so that parents are able to access the information and then engage with the teacher. Another thing is sometimes teachers, they give a lot of assignments and, they end up when I remember, and this is going to date me, but if we had, 9 grades for a 9-week grading period, like 1 per week, that would be fine. Now we're finding, teachers with all of the extra standards and reteaching, there's so many more grades. So I also think there could be things that we could recommend so that they don't feel that every assignment that's given has to go in for a formal grade. And I think sometimes that pressure is on them. But we'll work on that. We'll work on both sides. But I definitely agree. There's so much on their plates right now that they really are doing the very best that they can.
All right. Member Byrd.
Okay, I'll just belabor that one more minute. Just because, I think the issue really is that being a parent now is difficult to keep up and monitor as opposed to the way it was when we were young, because when I was young, I had a test I could show my parents and they can look at the test and see what I got wrong and they can help me with it. Now there is nothing that's a child can show a parent what they're working on unless they go in and they pull it up on their computer. And, that's a lot. And a lot of parents aren't going to take the time to do that. It's much easier to, like it was back in the day, right? So I think there's that piece of it that makes it harder as a parent, but also I have had the similar situation as Member Gould with my oldest. Very smart, could do great on tests, didn't like to do the work, didn't like to get things turned in. And that is a whole nother issue that I think we've talked about up here too, and that is how we allow students all semester, all term to turn in work. And I know the reasoning behind it is the mastery, all that, but that is a bad habit that we've let our kids get into. And I will say, as my child now is a freshman in college, that has been a hard habit to break. And she had a very difficult time when she started college, when she realized, oh, you mean a deadline's a deadline? Yeah, you got to get stuff turned in and then that's it. And I remember one professor she went to and even said she had, she was sick. He's like, I don't care. You had to get it turned in. So there is that discussion I think we also need to have. Because what has happened is when I, as a parent, see missing assignments, which I would see a lot from my oldest child, I would get, I turned that in. She just hasn't graded it yet. The grade's not in. And there's no way for me to know that because there is nothing on Skyward that shows it's been turned in but not graded. I couldn't, or at least not from what I could tell. So I would have to just take her word for it. And I knew in the back of my head, well, they are allowing them all 9 weeks to turn in their work. So it's very possible that in my mind, I'm like, okay, well, she could really not have turned it in, but she'll probably get it turned in by the end. And there's just always this thing. So I always had to reach out to teachers if I really wanted to get the true answer. And, it's so challenging as a parent from that point of view. And I don't know how we can make that easier. But if it's hard for a parent like me that is very aware of what's going on and very engaged, I'm imagining that most parents are not. And, just pulling up Skyward, I would guess that you're right, Dr. Vasquez, that a majority, or not a majority, but there's a lot of parents that are not aware of how to do it or don't even have the time. We've got parents working 2-3 jobs, So I don't know what the answer is. I just wanted to put that out there that those are some of the issues that I face as a parent that have made it very difficult to keep up with my child's progress and how they're doing. So there's that. How much time do I have? Okay. The other thing I just wanted to talk about was the section on comprehensive K through 20 career ed planning. I know we have talked about this, and I know that it says that in here that information will be provided to parents. I've talked to Dr. Armbruster about, creating some kind of one-stop shop for parents. But I really think that we need to focus a little more on this and have something a little more tangible that instead of just we'll provide information. I don't know what that is and I don't know how we do that, but somewhere in middle school, I think that we really have to have conversations with parents, and I don't think that that's happening very often. It's kind of like course selection goes on, and even in high school, they come into the English class, they give the presentation, course selection's made, and that's it. Parents can, of course, make appointments and reach out if they want to, but I feel like we really have to have some contact with parents at some point early on to make this plan and to share all of these career and education possibilities that we have and all those diverse pathways that we offer so that they know that they're there and they can make the best choices for their child. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Byrd. Member Salamanca.
There you go. Sorry about that. Thank you, Chair. I echo Member Byrd's concern on just that part of K through 20 career and education planning. Not related to the policy, but I think a one-stop shop, and I'm hearing from a lot of parents the confusion, especially at that transition from middle school to high school, and what they should be thinking about and whatnot. And our guidance counselors are also incredibly burdened with a lot of case management that I think maybe as a district, even just on content or education, we could maybe provide parents with a little bit more guidance so they can self-advocate, and same thing with students. Policy specific. The gifted program is referenced maybe 2 or 3 times here, with not a lot of information of what that progression looks like. There's kind of a change if you get put into gifted in elementary school, what that means when you go into in elementary school. When you go into middle school, you kind of get placed in advanced as long as your testing matches. But I think there's some confusion sometimes on the parents about that. And I know gifted students are a small population of the district, but if I was a parent reading through this policy, I don't think I would have a lot of understanding on what the progression is of a gifted student through what is currently on it.
Ms. Bridges?
Yes, and our ESC associate superintendent is in the back, but I know that in elementary school, there are quite a different types of models of gifted.
Correct.
And so I think that it's dependent on which school or which cluster. Some students go to another school for a gifted program once a week, and things like that go on. As for progression, again, we could look to the ESE and see if we could clarify that more in the progression plan for each level, because if you do have a gifted student, then there are accommodations that those gifted students do require and should be getting.
Thank you. Yeah, I was reading through it, and it wasn't very specific or detailed. And I agree. Every elementary school has a very different gifted structure, whether your kid has a full cluster class of gifted students or where your kid gets taken out once a week. But even what that transitions into in middle school and eventual high school, I think parents are less clear on. And so in here it would be really helpful to provide some outline for them to at least be able to navigate the differences. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Salamanca. Okay, that concludes board comments. Dr. Vasquez, you're recognized.
All right, our final policy for this morning is the Code of Conduct Policy JIC. And we have Sarah Korn and Demiki Joyner who will be presenting.
Good morning, school board members. I'm Sarah Corin. I am one of the lawyers with the Office of Legal Services, and with me today I have Demiki Joyner, who is the Director of Student Discipline. Today we are here for the first of what we imagine will be many work sessions and rule development workshops for OCPS policy JIC. The purpose today is that there are no actual revisions to JIC. The proposed revisions that we're looking at today are to comply with legislation and new rules. The action summary is that revisions have been made to the Code of Conduct for language to include content, formatting, and terminology edits consistent with statutory language. And I have to get to the right document. So as we stated this morning, we are going to go through the Code of Student Conduct. Again, this is one of many meetings that we will probably have. We understand that this is really today primarily just to look at two changes that we knew already we wanted to put in, and then primarily also changes in regards to the assessor codes that are coming through. Ms. Demiki Joyner is here with me, and we are going to go through the red line and provide those changes. How do I get this up there? Sarah, how do I get that to show? Huh? I don't know why it's not going up. There we go. Okay. Okay.
All right, so the red line changes and the cover is going to be date change. We've added our new school board members, and we've made name changes for our superintendent. Again, red line change would be the new date for the upcoming school year. Another new date. right, this is our summary page. If parents don't want to go through the entire code, they can use this page to see the changes that we've made. And if you notice, most of our changes here will cover our new titles. Changing the table of content. Again, changes in the table of content. So our first change is going to be on page 9, under student dress. We're adding just a sentence to say clothing and accessories that endanger students or staff shall not be worn. And the things we're talking about, this includes clothing that obscures the visual identification of a person unless approved by the principal. The use of medical masks worn for its intended purpose is permitted. We added this. There has been kids that are wearing like what we call, I consider a full ski mask, and that's not giving schools the ability to see their face. So we're adding that under the dress code. All right, on page 11.
It's page 33.
No, that's yours, Dan.
Okay. So as we start going into the code, again, I just want to remind again that these are proposed changes. We do know again that we're going to have multiple work sessions, multiple rule developments, and we know that there are changes that need to occur so that we can look at progressive discipline. Ms. Joyner's team is working very hard to look at the Cessor codes and see how we can comply with Cessor and also make sure that we incorporate progressive discipline into this policy. So this is really just to highlight today what Cessor is and also what some of those anticipated changes are so that we can then receive your feedback and go back and determine how best to put these into the code of conduct for next school year. The first Cessor-related item in the code that's proposed is on page 33, and this is language directly from the Cessor website. This information states that this information is intended to provide parents and students the notification that the school district is required to correctly code data used to report incidents that are against the law or represent serious breaches of the Code of Student Conduct. This includes those incidents considered severe enough to require the involvement of a school resource officer or incidents to be reported to law enforcement. The incidents that are required to be reported to Cessor or law enforcement are identified in the Code of Student Conduct with the 3-letter code identifying the Cessor incidents, and that when there are multiple incidents that occur at the same time, you are required to code the most serious incident or the highest money value incident if it's a money-related incident. Lastly, it does specifically state that the school district is required to report all Cessor incidents, regardless of age or disability, to law enforcement, and that the school district is required to then document if a case number was assigned, a report was filed, an affidavit was filed, a civil citation was issued, an investigation was conducted and found to be an incident reported to Cessor, or if an arrest was made. Next, we are going to move on to Section 4, which is the Discipline Response Code to Secondary, and we're going to be looking first at Level 1 offenses. There was an offense in Level 1 that was called disorderly conduct. It was a 1C. In discussions with the Office for Safe Schools and reviewing the Code of Student Conduct, disorderly conduct is really a term of art that is a legal term. It is a crime. So at this point, we have removed that term of art and we've removed the definition. A proposed definition has been proposed in Level 3B, which we have entitled disruptive conduct. Again, however, these are all at this point just proposed changes and ideas when it is a local code. As we move forward, also, I want to highlight that anything that you see in the code moving forward that does not have a 3-letter code under it and does not say must report to law enforcement, those would be local codes that the district has created versus a CESR code, which is something that is created from the Office of Safe Schools. Next, if you go to page 39, harassment has been taken out of a level 1 offense. Right now, we have moved all of harassment to level 3 because that is the CESR definition. We have moved bullying only to level 4. We understand that Ms. Joyner's team has discussed that they understand that there is a need for progressive discipline. At this time, we're really just highlighting where those CESR changes are. The next section is a level 2. So level 2C has been changed from fighting to physical altercation as a title. That is because the title of fighting is a CESR title. So we do not want there to be any confusion within the Code of Student Conduct. So for instance, if CESR has something that is called fighting, we're not going to call anything else fighting unless it is something that is reported to CESR. So a physical altercation would not be reported to CESR because it's really just 2 or more students pushing and shoving and it stops upon verbal command. That does not meet the CESR definition for a fight. The next section is hazardous language, and this right now is a template of language. We understand that it is not perfect language in any way, shape, or form. It's really more of a placeholder so that the discipline team can look at how to do progressive discipline for threats. The CESR definition of a threat is very specific, so this is definitely a placeholder of language right now, of just something to give an idea to the board of how the discipline team is looking at codifying threats or creating a progressive discipline situation. 2L, which is bullying, has been taken out as well, as we discussed. That will be the level 4 CESR threat, which is a level 4V. Level O harassment, which has also been discussed, that's been removed to avoid the CESR conflict, and it has been removed, and it is now the level 3V. Sexual harassment has also been taken out. There was progressive discipline in the Code of Student Conduct for sexual harassment, and the discipline team will work again to try to figure out ways to create progressive discipline with sexual harassment. However, right now, just to highlight those CESR changes, sexual harassment has been removed from all of the lower offenses, and we have put the sexual harassment definition in the level 4. Ms. Joyner's team, I'm confident, will be looking at that to see how progressive discipline can be created. So at this point, this is really just also a placeholder until we can speak with you and her team can get information from the community to figure out how to navigate this better. Next, we go to level 3. There is one CESR code that when we looked at it from a legal standpoint, we were able to do as a level 3 and as a level 4. And that is the first one. We used to call it physical attack. CESR now calls it simple battery. You will see that it is now entitled simple battery, and you know that it's a CESR offense because it says PHA under it, which is the 3-letter CESR code. And then under it, it also says must report to law enforcement because we want to make sure that parents and families understand that this is a CESR offense and it must be reported to law enforcement. And in simple battery, there were 2 sections of the CESR code for simple battery. One had no injury and one had injury. So if it does not have an injury, it's a level 3. If it does have injury, it's a level 4. This is the only code right now where we have a CESR definition in both a level 3 and a level 4. The next one is a 3E, extortion and blackmail. The district used to report this to CESR, but is no longer required to. The difference is that this offense only has a willful or malicious threat of harm. It doesn't actually have an attempted taking or harm, and therefore extortion and blackmail no longer needs to be reported to CESR. The next definition is fighting, and that is where earlier, as I stated, we needed to change fighting to physical altercation because there is a level 3 fighting for CESR. The discipline team proposes it to be a level 3. Again, all of the changes for the CESR codes are the actual CESR code and definition, which is why I am presenting it because it's coming straight from the statute. So I just want to be clear on that The discipline team has not created these codes or these definitions in any way. So you will see that it's fighting, FIT, must be reported to law enforcement, and then this is the fighting definition under Cessor. The discipline team did discuss about the bold information that is contained here. That was information that the school board wanted put in last year to discuss when there are 2 or more people and they are mutual combatants. And the school board last year added this language to talk about when someone's acting in self-defense or when they are trying to run away. The discipline team is reviewing this information, but at this point, we do not think that this in any way violates the intent of the Cessor rules, so it has not been deleted at this time. The next code is a 3L, which is tobacco. It used to be called smoking, vaping, and other use of tobacco or nicotine products. This is also a Cessor offense. So as you can see, it says tobacco, TBC, must be reported to law enforcement, and then this is the Cessor code. You will notice that for all tobacco codes, it says tobacco incidents cannot be drug-related. The Cessor codes for drugs are very clear that drugs cannot be reported as alcohol, and the alcohol Cessor codes are all very clear that alcohol cannot be reported as drugs. It is all written very specifically in the administrative code. We continue down to 3N, and the discipline team looked at creating a code unauthorized entrance to OCPS property. The original code here was trespassing, but trespassing is now a Cessor code, and it has very strict requirements where it requires someone to have already been told that they need to leave campus. So in a way to be able to codify when people are unauthorized on campus for the first time versus unauthorized on campus for the second time, the discipline team looked at creating a local code, which is unauthorized entrance to OCPS property, and this is different than the level 4 Cessor code for trespassing, which we will show you when we get to it in a little while. Next is the level 3 offense for bullying, and as previously discussed, we have taken bullying out right now of levels 1, 2, and 3. The proposed change as of right now is to have bullying as the level 4V offense for bullying within the Cessor code. The discipline team is going to work to see if there is a way to do progressive discipline and still appropriately cite and report to Cessor. And that's something that we know that the board has been looking at and will be taken into consideration. Level 3 RR was just clarified in the title to add physical aggression on an employee, contracted vendor, or volunteer. There had been questions in the past because that language was not in the title if that could be coded. So that was just for clarification purposes. The next one is sexual harassment. Again, that has been removed at this point, and it is currently as the level 4O to avoid the Cessor conflict. As discussed in the level 2, we have a 3T right now, hazardous language. This is again that placeholder language to try to have a progressive discipline situation for threats in the Code of Student Conduct. Right now, the threat Cessor definition is a level 4, and the discipline team will be working with this language and taking all suggestions into consideration when looking at how to have progressive discipline for threats. The next one is a level 3V, and this is harassment, and this is a Cessor code. So you can see that it's harassment, it's HAR, and it must be reported to law enforcement. The school district's definition of harassment last year in the Code of Student Conduct was almost identical to the current Cessor definition, except for his or her instead of his/her. So we wanted to make it exactly as the Cessor definition. Next, there is a 3W for hazing. Hazing is a Cessor definition, and based on the definition given from the Office for Safe Schools and the Administrative Code for hazing, the discipline team proposes that hazing would be a level 4. Lastly is level 3BB, disruptive conduct. This was the local code that the discipline team thought of for right now. It is currently a placeholder, but it is also a suggestion where it's conduct or behavior that interferes or disrupts with the orderly process of teaching or learning in the classroom. This is a response to deleting the level 1 disorderly conduct, and the thought of the discipline team was to really cover more of those behaviors that truly interfere with teaching on a regular basis, which is why it was coded as a level 3. Next, we go to level 4. A level 4A is alcohol. It is shown by the 3-letter code. It states must report to law enforcement. And this is the exact Susser definition. It is the possession, sale, purchase, distribution, or use of alcoholic beverages. Use means the person is caught in the act of using, admits to use, or is discovered to have used in the course of the investigation. And then it states alcohol incidents cannot be drug-related. The next level 4 offense is arson, which is B. You can see that it says ARS, must be reported to law enforcement. The Susser definition changes the school district's definition in that it says to intentionally damage or cause to be damaged by fire or explosion any dwelling, structure, or conveyance, whether occupied or not, or its contents. So you will see later in level 4 that the discipline team worked to create a code, which is a local code called Igniting, and that will cover those discipline incidents where something wasn't intentionally damaged by fire. So for instance, if students lit a trash can on fire and there wasn't a lot of damage, it can still be coded as a discipline offense. The next is a level 4C, and it is now threat intimidation, TRE, must be reported to law enforcement. And the Susser definition is written exactly as it comes from the Susser code. And it's an incident where there was no physical contact between the offender and victim, but the victim reasonably believed that physical harm could have occurred based on verbal or nonverbal communication by the offender. This includes nonverbal threats and verbal threats of physical harm, which are made in person, electronically, or through any other means. This includes instilling fear in others. Fear comes from the victim's perception, and intent and capability are more broadly taken into account for all Susser incidents. The fear coming from the victim's perception is a new addition and thought process when it comes to the Susser definitions that were presented this year in the administrative code. The next one is aggravated battery. It was our regular battery, and it's now been changed to aggravated battery, which is the Susser definition. It is BAT. It states must report to law enforcement. And the Susser definition is here. A battery where the attacker intentionally or knowingly causes more serious injury as defined in the administrative code rule, such as great bodily harm, permanent disability, or permanent disfigurement, uses a deadly weapon, or where the attacker knew or should have known the victim was pregnant. This includes death or injuries with substantial risk of death, extreme physical pain, protracted or obvious disfigurement, and protracted loss or impairment of the function of a bodily member, organ, or mental faculty. The next one is threats to a school. That title remains the same. We've added the Susser code and must report to law enforcement. And we have updated the definition to align exactly with the Susser definition. The next one is drug use and possession. That is changed from drugs, possession, and use, which was the title from the Code of Conduct last year. The 3-letter code is there. It must be reported to law enforcement. And the definition directly from the Susser rule is right here. The next one is a level 4H. This used to be firearms, weapons, destructive devices, possession, quote, weapons. This is now weapons possession. It's a WPO, and it must be reported to law enforcement. The Susser definition did change when it comes to weapons this year. The definition used to be any weapon that was in Section 790 of the Florida statutes. Now it specifically states 790.0016 6 and 13. This is a change. 790.0016 is the definition of a firearm, and 790.0013 is the definition of a weapon. Because of that, the school district used to report this weapons offense and the other dangerous objects offense, which is a level 4, both to Susser. Now the school district will be reporting the weapons that fall within a 4H to Susser, and there is a local code for other dangerous weapons, such as chains, if they are used to significantly hurt someone, as another dangerous object. I also do just want to point out that this rule does talk about a slung shot and a billy. That is the exact language as it's written in the statute. I do believe it's supposed to be slingshot and billy club, but that is what the statute says. So I do just want to make the board aware that this is not a typo. This is written exactly from the statute. The next Cessor code that does have a change for us is disruption on campus. It used to be major disruption on campus. Now it's disruption on campus major, and it's DOC. Must be reported to law enforcement. And the significant change here is that this is disruptive behavior that poses a serious threat to the learning environment, and examples of major disruptions include bomb threats, inciting a riot, or initiating a false alarm. This used to be the offense where if we had a multiple person fight and we had to close down the cafeteria or we had to shut down the school for a while, where we would also code those offenses in this section. But that really would not rise right now to the statutory definition of a bomb threat or a riot. So there has been a new local code created in level 4, which we will get to, which is an HH, and that is interruption of campus activities, so that discipline still can be codified. However, it would not be reported to Cessor. The next one is a 4J. It used to be larceny and theft. It is now grand theft and is $750 or over. The definition is very close to the former definition, but to make sure that it aligned exactly with the administrative code, we have deleted the old definition and used the Cessor definition word for word. Next is the 4K. That is the other dangerous objects section. This section used to be reported to Cessor, and now it no longer needs to. If the weapon, as we stated, fits within the Cessor definition of a weapon, it will be reported to Cessor. If it does not fit within the Cessor definition of a weapon, it would be coded under a 4K, other dangerous objects. And here it states that it's included but not limited to BB guns, pellet guns, airsoft guns, common pocket knives, chains, pipes, etc. And this language was in the code last year. There has not been any change except to just cite the weapons level 4H. The next change is robbery. Robbery stays the same as the title. It is now ROB, and it must be reported to law enforcement. And the definition is here. The robbery definition is important this year in that it does very clearly differentiate between grand theft and robbery, and that robbery involves violence, a threat of violence or assault, and putting the victim in fear, where grand theft just involves the taking. So if you were just to take someone's cell phone off their desk, for instance, that would be grand theft. If you force someone to give you the phone, that could possibly be robbery. Next is sexual battery, and this is the SXB code. It must be reported to law enforcement. The Cessor definition has been made clearer this year from what the original definition was in our Code of Student Conduct, and the Cessor definition has been outlined very clearly right here in this paragraph. The next section is level 4O, sexual harassment, and you can see that it is SXH. It must be reported to law enforcement, and the definition has been changed to align with the Cessor definition. While it does say must be reported to law enforcement, level 4O in the title, the actual Cessor definition also states that law enforcement must be notified to investigate. That is why it is written in that section twice. The next one is a level 4P, sexual offenses. This language it's very similar to what the old language was in our Code of Student Conduct, but again, we wrote down the language exactly how it is written in the Cessor rule. This rule also does state law enforcement must be notified to investigate, which is why it is written in the actual definition and in the title. Next is criminal mischief. This used to be our vandalism, and we've deleted the old code for the Code of Student Conduct from last year, and we have added the new code. It is very similar, but we have added the Cessor definition here as well. The next one is other major, OMC, and this is also a Cessor definition. It is any serious harmful incident resulting in the need for law enforcement that is not previously classified. The next is a 4U. It used to be drugs, transmission, distribution, selling, and buying. The title for assessor is now drug sale, distribution, excluding alcohol. As I stated earlier, anything with drugs very clearly says not alcohol. Anything that's alcohol very clearly now says not drugs. And we have added the assessor definition here as well. The next one is bullying, as we stated for right now as placeholders, but in order to consider some sort of progressive discipline, harassment, which you can see is deleted as the 4W, is now a level 3. Bullying has been put as a level 4 with the thought that harassment is one time, bullying is repeated conduct. So that is an attempt to use the assessor definitions with progressive discipline. And the assessor definition for bullying is outlined here. Next is the level 4 offense for hazing. The HAZ code is here. It also says must report to law enforcement. And the hazing definition was expanded this year to state that hazing includes but is not limited to pressuring, coercing, or forcing a student to participate in illegal or dangerous behavior or brutality of a physical nature, such as whipping, beating, branding, or exposure to the elements. Based on the additional language, the discipline team's proposal is that this is a level 4 and no longer a level 3. Next is simple battery, PHA, and it must be reported to law enforcement. And this is the actual and intentional touching or striking of another person against his or her will, or the intentional causing of bodily harm to an individual. This definition is updated from the assessor definition. It's important to remember that there are 2 battery definitions in level 4. One is simple battery, one is aggravated battery. The simple battery pursuant to assessor requires first aid and subsequent medical attention, whereas aggravated battery is serious bodily injury, which is loss of a function of a bodily member, organ, protracted disfigurement, etc. And the next one is the 4Z, which is sexual assault. It is SXA. It must be reported to law enforcement. And this definition, the new assessor definition, very closely mirrors the definition that we had in the Code of Conduct last year. But again, to make sure that it exactly aligns with assessor, the assessor definition has been included. The next is burglary. It is now BRK. It must be reported to law enforcement. And again, the assessor definition has been added and the former definition has been taken out. The next code is homicide. It is HOM. It must be reported to law enforcement. The code from last year did say the unjustified killing of one human being by another. The assessor code includes this sentence exactly how it is written. It does say this includes murder, comma, manslaughter. That is not a typo. That is how it is written in the administrative code. The next one is kidnapping, KID, must report to law enforcement. The assessor definition adds secretly when you are kidnapping, adds secretly as a possibility for kidnapping, and it includes the abduction of an individual. As stated when we were going through the changes earlier, there was a level 4 for tobacco. In reviewing the definition of tobacco, it is the discipline team's proposal that the assessor definition for tobacco is a level 3, not a level 4. Next, the discipline team created GG, which is igniting. This would be a local code, and it is fires that are not intentional, that are caused by accident or do not cause damage, and that is to capture any language that can no longer be captured in the assessor definition for arson. The district wants to, the proposed changes are to make sure that reporting to the Office for Safe Schools is 100% accurate. So the proposed changes create local codes so that additional information is not added to the assessor definition, so that would make sure that we are not over-reporting or under-reporting, but we are reporting exactly what needs to be reported. The next one is the 4HH, interruption of campus operations. This is offenses that disrupt campus activities, school-sponsored events, and school bus transportation, but do not pose a serious threat to the learning environment. So for instance, this would be if we needed to close the cafeteria because of a fight. That is really not the learning environment, but the discipline team wanted to make sure there was a local code to make sure that that behavior was captured. When you look in the level 4s, the level 4T used to be the 4T other for the district, where anything that didn't really fit anywhere else was in the 4T. That assessor definition changed, so as a result of that, the discipline team proposes incidents beyond the bounds of acceptable behavior, and this would be an intentional or wanting act that is clearly beyond the bounds of acceptable and tolerable student conduct in the community, where you cannot find another level 4 for it. The last one is JJ. That has now been added because that is the new trespassing from Cessor. So it says trespassing, TRS, must be reported to law enforcement. I remind that the old OCPS trespassing definition was a level 3, but because the new Cessor definition requires to enter or remain on school grounds or campus without authorization or invitation and with no lawful purpose for entry, it only includes if a student comes back when they're under suspension or expulsion, or incidents where someone has already been told not to come on campus. So because of that, we have the level 3 for the unauthorized entry to campus, and then there is the Cessor definition, the level 4 JJ, which is trespassing, TRS, and must be reported to law enforcement. Next, we would go to the elementary code. I am seeking clarification from the board. The changes that have been made in the secondary code have also been made for the elementary code. We do understand that there have been child-friendly definitions in the elementary code. Those were taken out right now with the proposed revisions, and the Cessor definitions were put in their place. Ms. Joyner and the discipline team is working with the Office of Safe Schools, and they're going to contact other school districts to examine if there needs to be a separate elementary code or if those codes can be softened. But for right now, the changes are identical. I ask the board if you want me to review this again in the elementary code, or if we can. Okay.
Who feels the need to be redundant? Okay. I don't think so at this moment.
I just want to make sure.
Thank you.
So
Absolutely.
Okay. So there are 2 more changes, so I will take you down to page 76. And again, as I had stated, as of right now, these were really only Cessor changes, but in addition, the discipline team did acknowledge that there were 2 areas that we knew we wanted to add, so if we had them ready, we did. One was the dress code. And the next one is right here, and this is 76. When we have had students come before the board because they have a level 4 offense, they have often asked the school board to reduce their consequence or change their discipline offense. And in response to that, there has been questions over the past year or so of what is within the board purview and what there is not within the board purview. Florida Statute 100607 states that the school board can adopt rules for the control and discipline of students and expulsion, and that the school board is supposed to decide all cases recommended for expulsion. So based on that statute, the superintendent would bring the recommendation for expulsion to the school board, and then at that point, it would be within the purview of the school board pursuant to the statute to make the decision as to if that expulsion is going to stand or not. So based on that, we have added in the steps of how discipline is handled for a level 4. That's step 13. The school board may reject the hearing officer's finding of fact only if it determines that there is no substantial competent evidence to support the findings of fact. The school board may reject the conclusions of law only if it determines that OCPS policy JIC/Code of Student Conduct was misinterpreted or applied incorrectly. The school board may reduce or increase the penalty only upon review of the complete record and must state with particularity its reasons by citing to the record to justify the action. And then step 14 was added, that for full exclusions and modifications to other level 4 discipline matters brought before the school board will execute a final order memorializing the discipline consequence. This is also pursuant to Florida Statute 1006.07, where the school board should be executing full orders when there are full exclusions, and to memorialize any changes if the school board was to change a different level 4 that wasn't a full exclusion. The proposed language also recommends memorializing a final order in those instances as well. The last change, just to highlight, is when it comes to the procedures for Title IX. Ms. Cowens, who is the attorney for Title IX within our office, has advised me that there may be a change from the United States Department of Education, and those changes are anticipated in May. So we just wanted to put that placeholder in here so that the board was aware of those changes as well. Let me go back to the PowerPoint. Okay. Again, as we've stated, we are aware that this is the first of what will probably be many work sessions or rule development workshops. Today, I have presented many of the legal changes for Cessor. It's anticipated in the future that Ms. Joyner and her team will be presenting any additional changes moving forward, because those would really be administrative changes and management changes based on input from the school board, the discipline task force, discipline community meetings, the discipline survey, OCPS departments that all weigh in on the Code of Student Conduct, and any additional information or guidance that we receive from the Office for Safe Schools. It's anticipated that we will have more work sessions, we will have more rule development workshops, and that the discipline team will also be meeting with all of you individually again to receive input on the Code of Student Conduct that is not Cessor-related, or Cessor-related if you also want to provide additional information on that as well. And with that, we welcome any questions or discussion regarding the proposed changes at this time.
All right, thank you. I have a couple. Since the statute reads slingshot, and it's pretty safe to conclude it was meant to be slingshot, unless there's a prohibition against us including slingshot as a local amendment, I would recommend that we do that, since nobody has any idea what a slingshot is. But, oh, I'm sorry, Member Felder knows what a slingshot is. Oh, okay.
And apparently I did misspeak, because a slingshot and a slingshot, I was just taught by Ms. Kopesky, are two different things.
Slingshot
so I
is
just
something?
learned something new, and I apologize for speaking wrong. A slingshot is when you pull something like this. A slingshot is kind of like a nunchuck, but it is a cord.
Okay, never mind.
I apologize for that, because that is something that I just learned as well.
All right. And I know we're all...
But we can add slingshot to other dangerous objects. That is something for the other section. We can add slingshot if...
Well, frankly, since slingshot is something and may be more dangerous than a slingshot, I withdraw my comment. And thank you, Ms. Kopesky, for that research. One thing, I know that we're really trying to stick to the changes made by the state. One thing I brought up, and because I really think it is a safety issue, I would like to try to persuade the board to make that change sooner than later, and that is the concern that I've expressed before. I never thought about it until I heard from a parent who was very concerned about taking cell phones away from students when they misuse them, which I agree is a problem, and the appropriate response consequence had always seemed to me to be to confiscate it, until I realized that for some of our students that go home to a house that has no phone, that would include mine now, there's no way for that student to call 911. There's no way for the parent to check, make sure the student got home. If the student is riding their bike home or walking home and there's an altercation, they can't reach out for any help. And so, since cell phones now are no longer just a communication device, but may be a lifeline to safety, I would like us to reconsider the automatic confiscation. And also, we have in our code of conduct that the parent must come back to get the device, which again always made sense, except the very children who may be most vulnerable to not having that phone may very well have parents who will not be out of work in time to come back and get that phone in a timely fashion. So I could envision a student going a whole week without their safety device. I don't have an answer for what an alternative appropriate consequence would be, but I would like us to, when this comes to rule development, for us to be able to consider alternatives to that. And the only thing that comes to mind is that the student, if the parent has not reached out to the school and taken accountability, that the device will be confiscated from the student for the entire day and returned to them at the end of the day. So and I don't know if you can advertise two different versions, one with and one without. I don't want to put the board in a position where they have to make a decision on this today and we're not voting. But I do want to have that as an option that we could implement this year. God forbid any of our students would be in that situation. And I can think of a few that have happened this year where a student might very well have needed to have that cell phone, and it might have been in the principal's office. So the other thing, and I don't think it necessarily fits in here, it might be dress code, is, and this really goes to next year, so it can wait, but the idea of exploring clear backpacks as a requirement, along with enhanced scanning tools, but that I think will come out of your disciplinary task force as possibly some other alternatives we haven't thought of. So the main one for me right this minute is cell phones, and that's all I have to say on that. So Member Castor-Daniel, you're recognized next, and if you have any thoughts on that subject, I'd love to hear them.
All right, thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you for reviewing. I don't even think you took a breath that whole time. So thank you for all that work. And I know that the discipline team also was involved in a lot of these changes. And I appreciate all the work, because it's pretty difficult to kind of tease these different levels out. You mentioned the term progressive consequences or progressive discipline. Can you define that?
Sure. So when we look at progressive discipline, when we look at our referral form, we try to have a level 2 offense, a level 3 offense, and then a level 4 offense for a lot of our discipline. So kids don't automatically get hit with the level 4. You start with the 2, and you may give them, a warning. They could get detention. Then if they continue, then staff could go down and do a level 3. Then at a level 3, you may get pass. You may get suspended out of school for a couple of days. And then if this behavior continue, then it can progress to a level 4.
So it doesn't mean, it doesn't mean a like liberal progressive. It means it
there's a consequence.
It's a ladder of consequences that get more severe
as we progress down. Yes.
Just want to make sure that.
Yes, ma'am. Progressive is not a political term or a moral term in any way. It is more of a leveled discipline, if that is a better term for us to use moving forward, of having lower consequences and then higher consequences.
All right. Thank you. I have a couple questions. I stepped out momentarily. I'm not sure if you went over this, but we did. You did go over it with us in our one-on-ones. The interruption of campus operations as a infraction, would that include students who coordinate a protest or a walkout? Would they be subject to discipline, or is that more of a freedom of speech issue?
So the only one I can recall, I think I discussed this with you, I think last year, kids wanted to express themselves for something that was going on. And I think the district got with principals to try and organize a way for kids to have freedom of speech. So if it was in organized fashion, no, it wouldn't be considered like a riot, or they wouldn't receive discipline for things like that.
Okay. Superintendent, if we could, wants to be recognized on that to respond.
So I need a comment on that. I did receive a phone call about that, and it was perceived that the district was supporting violation of the code of conduct because it could ensue some type of disruptive behavior. And so moving forward, that is probably not something that we're going to do again. In fact, we had to send out a different message this year. It was within, I think, my first week of being superintendent, that we would not tolerate any type of disruption. While we will not in any way inhibit students to be able to have that right, we cannot condone it.
Thank you, Superintendent Vasquez. I'm concerned by that restriction because in the past, administration was helpful in making sure those events were safe with adult guidance. So I don't know if it's necessarily condoning them if you are helping students understand how they can safely get their points across if they're going to do a walkout or some kind of protest. So I guess we need a little bit more discussion on that so that there's some clarity so that we don't have students or administrators getting in unnecessary trouble. And then one more comment I have is, maybe this is for the superintendent. I'm not in the classroom. I haven't been on the intranet in a while. Is there a digital link to the referral forms that teachers can have access to?
Dr. Vasquez?
No, there is not. Currently.
It might be helpful to have that available because it's hard to like stop what you're doing and find a form down in the office if you don't know where they all are. But I think having access for teachers in one place for any teacher on the intranet might be an easy solution. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Castrodental. Member Byrd?
Good points, Member Castrodental. Thank you. I definitely do agree that we need more discussion on student protests. I'm guessing what you mean when you say that we won't tolerate it, meaning they will be disciplined, they will get referrals.
No, I'm sorry. If there is a disruption as a result of their protests, that we will follow through with consequences, not if they protest. My apologies if
No, that's
misunderstood.
okay. Thank you. No, that clarifies. I do think it would be hard not to cause a disruption if there's a student protest. So I do have some concern there just because I don't want to see students getting in trouble for practicing their free speech. And I think our students have been very smart about these situations when they arise. They're not going out and doing it all the time. It's been very specific issues that they feel very passionate and strongly about. So I would hate to see that sort of advocacy hampered. I have some concern, and I've shared this with the team when I met with them, with physical aggression on employees resulting in no injury being a level 3. I've had numerous teachers tell me that they don't think it's right that, as long as there's not an injury, that it's a level 3, that they feel like it should be a level 4. Anytime any student shows hits, punches, injures in any way a staff member, regardless of the result. And I personally agree with that. I don't think that it should be in the level 3. I would love to see that in level 4. I think that would send a strong message to our employees that we respect them and we want to protect them from getting hurt on the job. So I'd like to see, that's my preference, to see that moved. And then, really I agree with progressive discipline. I understand why we do it. But I really feel like we are at a point in our schools where what we've been doing isn't working, and I'm sure the Discipline Task Force is going to talk about this, but giving students multiple times to misbehave, and I'm talking about the more serious things like fighting, that we've got level 3 simple battery, level 3 fighting, level 4 simple battery, level 4 aggravated battery. There's so many different levels, and I feel like maybe it's time for us not to be so progressive. Maybe we need to be more like, you fight, you're getting a level 4. You do this, it's a level 4. Very matter-of-factly, because my thinking is if they know they can do it once and there isn't a very serious consequence, or it's a level 3, it's not a level 4. Level 4, they know in their head is more serious. Then there's not a lot of deterrent. And I think that's what we're seeing, where these kids are not afraid of misbehaving because they're not afraid of the consequences because they don't have a lot of consequences, as we've heard in our town hall meetings and from parents. So maybe it's time that we just be stronger about that. So I have some concerns about there being so many different levels for things like fighting. The fighting has become a real problem, and I'm very, very concerned about when I see staff members breaking up fights in schools, and that shouldn't be part of their job. And then just a little typo, not a typo, but a thing that I think we need to check is on level 4, the description of level 4s that comes before all of the offenses. It says may be reported to law enforcement, but then on level 3, it does not say that. And we might need to add that to level 3 since some of those are possibly reported to law enforcement. And finally, the phone thing, maybe because I kind of agree that there needs to be some accountability with parents. We hear that all the time. Parents, there's no accountability. And maybe if we hold the phone for the day, give it back to them at the end of the day, they have to turn it back in the next morning until a parent comes, and they have to keep doing that until a parent comes to the school, and maybe we have some kind of form or contract they sign about cell phone, whatever. I don't know. Just an idea.
Thank you. Thank you, Member Byrd. Member Byrd has raised a couple of potential changes, and I just want to get a read on the board because whatever comes back to us will have to be voted up or down. And so one of them was looking at violence to teachers, violence among staff, be elevated to a level 4. Pulse on the board?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. I think, I don't know that it's unanimous, but I think there's enough support to include that. And so I would suggest that we look at that language, and the other language that you suggested was fights, not be. I think there's a room for progressive. I mean, maybe you get expelled for a certain length of time, but if you've done it 3 times, it's a longer length of time. But I agree with you. I think we need to have more of a zero tolerance. So is there agreement with increasing fights? That should be considered. And
can I pitch in here?
Dr. Vasquez, are you? No. Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. Member Salamanca, go ahead.
It intuitively makes a lot of sense to be zero tolerance, but I do want to be mindful that there's a reason why in the law you have a difference between voluntary and involuntary crimes, because it does impact the severity of it. I would love to get a sense from teachers, a little bit maybe broader on how they. I know that we want to be stricter about this, and I want to respect teachers, but I also don't want to put teachers in a place where they might not report something because it's no longer a level 3, but a level 4 for a young student who perhaps doesn't quite yet understand the consequences. And so, yeah, I don't know yet that I'm supportive of going drastically to level 4 only. I think there is a gray area between voluntary and involuntary between level 3 and level 4 that I think is captured here, and I'm sure there's a lot of thought behind that for a reason, but yeah.
So let me do this. The board is lit up. I mean, not this board, the one I'm looking at that shows who wants to talk. Whoops. Can we just stay on this topic for a minute? And this isn't a time to spend a lot of time on debate, but if there isn't a strong consensus around it, I think it needs to be debated further. But I see Member Gould weighing in. I hear some comments over here. Member Gould, your thoughts on?
So on the fight in particular, not so much any kind of assault to a teacher, although I understand that, especially in the younger students who may need to learn that boundary. But we've had this discussion before on fights. You know, as soon as you go to defend yourself, you're part of the fight. And we don't want fights. We need to tamp this down. But the term zero tolerance concerns me if somebody has been harassed and they are defending themselves or someone else from harm, and now the aggressor and the defender are equally punished, and there's not room in the investigation to distinguish between the two. So that would be the only thing that I would, and I don't know what kind of language we could put around that, but that would, I assume, come out in the investigation with testimonies and incident reports. And if I don't think it deters the behavior we really want to deter in the person who is causing the aggression, if the person that they want to get in trouble is also getting in the same amount of trouble. Not that they shouldn't get in some, but I think that we want to be careful how restrictive we become in that definition.
Thank you, Member Gould. Member Felder, do you want to weigh in on this as well?
First of all, I just want to thank this district's disciplinary team. When I had my private meeting with Ms. Corn, I saw, I said, God, this is a lot of work. She says, this is my job. This is what I must do. But having taught in OCPS and in the classroom over 40 years, I'm happy to know that this board has understanding of the danger and the uncomfortable, for lack of a better word, the uncomfortable feeling that a staff, principal, or teacher has when a fight breaks out. Because the immediate concern is the safety. I don't care what, that's the first thing teachers think about. That's the first thing staff think about is the safety. And then the effect, it's going to have on the rest of the class or the school. But I also understand about the progressive. There was something you all put in place before I got on the board, a matrix you put because you were trying to eliminate children getting suspended for chewing gum or cursing. You were trying, and then those children, those students of ours, they really have some issues going on that we have to kind of work through. I know, have to work through, so you don't want to immediately put them out. 'Cause we had that conversation last year, just sending kids home. Member Gallo said, well, what are they going to do? Who's there with them? But the same token, as Member Byrd has so eloquently spoken and shared with us, we're living in some different times, y'all. We're living in some different times, and we have to, I think, as Chair Jacobs has said, this is going to call for us to have more discussion. We can't solve it right now, but we definitely going to have a time where we really talk about it, pull up our bootstraps, bring out peanut butter and jelly sandwiches and sit here and really, because I'm hungry, really deal with the issue so that we can get it straight, because the community, the school, the parents, they look to this board. We have to come up with the answers. That's why we were elected. So we got to come up with the answers. So I just want to share that. Thanks.
Thank you. I don't want to unnecessarily cut off discussion, but I will say that we have at least 4 board members who think the issue of fighting and how we deal with that needs further discussion. The 4th one being myself, and I really appreciate both of your comments and all 3 of your comments, because it's as always happens. There is so much value, I think, in group thinking, and it's the reason when we come together we make better decisions than individually. So I think we need to slow down on that. As far as violence against teachers, I think that there's more support in that area. I do think we'd probably all agree that a kindergartner we might treat a little differently than a senior in high school. So I don't know how much that language needs to be finessed as far as that consideration. Member Ferrand.
Thank you. Speaking to that, that's actually, I feel like, very concerning. We have even kindergartners, first, second graders who are, being aggressive towards their teacher or towards a staff member, whoever it might be. So it's not just students, but it disrupts the learning. It disrupts the teacher. Now the teacher feels flustered. What are we doing with this child? Okay, so it happens once. We talk to the child. We pull them out. We say, hey, that kind of behavior is not acceptable. We don't do that here. They've now been told. I think the zero tolerance needs to come in where we say, okay, we're not playing games, so we don't do that here. You want to do that, you get in trouble. So then what is the trouble that they get in? Is it just, a slap on the wrist? Like, we have to do something more. And for our educators to know that we are not tolerating that kind of behavior for kids. So even kindergartners, they know right from wrong. They know better. So when we tell them, listen, when you look at a kindergartner and you say, we will not tolerate that behavior is not okay, that's not acceptable. If they do it again, sorry, there's consequences. So when they start getting consequences, they'll learn real fast.
Member Ferrand, I'm not sure who I'm going to next. I'm going to try to clear the deck so that whoever is responding is on this. Only thing I would say on that is I agree with you, but that included one morning for a kindergartner or a young child, which I think makes a lot of sense, because there are homes where pushing and shoving is commonplace. So I agree with you that if you've given a child a warning, that's a little different, but even that is not the same as saying one push to a teacher from a kindergartner and they're expelled. Right.
So I think, but we need to have something then that needs to go into policy that says for these grades we give a warning. But if you're, or maybe everybody, it doesn't matter. I don't know. I just think those younger grades especially give that warning, but then they're very well aware. Or is it something in the beginning of the year you're explaining to the kids, we do not do this? That progressive discipline type thing. But if it's progressive where we're saying, okay, you did that once, no, that was naughty, okay, they now do it again, and we're like, well, we don't like that, don't do that now. Okay, well, they're going to continue doing it because there's no discipline.
So here's where we are. If there's not a solid consensus on what direction we're giving the staff, they can't move forward with language that comes back to us that we would be able to approve that adopts all the legislative requirements. And so I think we need to be cautious about putting something in that would delay us being able to pass what we need to pass. I think as strongly as everybody else, I'm in strong agreement with what Member Ferrant just said, but I'm not sure exactly where that breakdown is, exactly when that morning takes place. I personally wouldn't be, if I was staff, I'm not sure what I'm supposed to write right now. So I would suggest that that be delayed until we have more clarity, but that's my opinion. I'm going to hear from the superintendent, and then I will take whoever wants to speak next that hasn't spoken. Member, our superintendent? Oh, you look like you were jumping in.
So a reminder, we have 2 codes. So we could have, for the elementary, a different set of consequences or levels than we do at the secondary level. As we've been digging into comments that we're hearing from teachers and staff, okay, a lot of this overt aggressive behavior is coming from students with disabilities or students who are in the process of being identified or under that umbrella. So I need for you to understand that what you're saying would not apply to them, but that is the bulk of what we're hearing. That it's students who it's a manifestation of their disability. They're acting out. We have had discussions about what are some alternatives we might be able to have, including a positive pathways that would allow for the supports that some of these students need, that it might be in a self-contained EBD classroom or ASD classroom, that are aggressive and may be able to go to an alternative site for a shorter period of time and still be able to receive the supports that they need in hoping to change that behavior. But I need for you to understand that as we've started to peel that onion back, it's typically not your regular ed student.
Would you agree?
No, I'm in full agreement that if they hit a staff member, it's a level 4. But that's that's my opinion. I think that we are in different times. I think that we have been gracious and trying to lead with grace with our staff, with our students. But what we're seeing now with discipline is something that's going to require, I believe, a different approach to how we deal with discipline. And it may be an approach that only needs to take place for a year, 2 years, where we are able to reset. But what we're doing isn't working. Our staff are very frustrated. We're trying to put in place systems and structures to support children in knowing appropriate behavior and how you can seek assistance. But at the end of the day, if you're a classroom teacher and you can't instruct because a child is continuing to disrupt your classroom and we have a cap on what we can do, it's not going to get any better. And so I know that's hard because, we want to be able to support children. We understand what's happened over these last few years. But if we don't take a different approach, I think we're going to continue to see what we're saying. And I'm not saying in a punitive manner. I think we need to continue to look at those supports that children need on the behavioral side. And I do have some ideas that I'm going to be sharing on Friday. But I also think that we need to send a message that these behaviors are not acceptable, and these are the consequences. And certainly understanding that, we would look at each situation to ensure that it meets the criteria. And certainly a primary student who doesn't quite understand or is reactive and we're still working with them would have a different consequences than a middle schooler.
So, Superintendent, my concern is that what we're giving to your staff is somewhat vague, and they have to write specific language to come back to us in order for the board to adopt or amend the code. And whatever we advertise, we have to vote on it exactly as it is. I'm trying to determine, do we have that specific language? And
so, may I? What we're trying to pass right now are just assessor changes, right? That's the only thing that we need in order to move forward. I think Sarah Corin mentioned we're going to have more meetings. This is out of our normal scope. They changed the assessor code, so now we have to come back and change it on our form. You will still have the opportunity to bring back changes that will be implemented for the following school year. But what we need approval on is just assessor language.
And that was where I was trying to get us back to, because I don't want to send the message that we are not serious about changes. I just don't want us to block the assessor changes as we debate this, which is going to take a little bit more discussion. So if there's anybody that objects to us going forward with the assessor changes and further discussing where we draw that line on you get a warning, you don't get a warning, and what the consequences are, now would be the time to speak. Member Byrd? You're okay. Member Gold. I know, it's getting harder.
They are getting harder. I think they're breaking. We pushed too hard. I think this brings up, especially about our ESE population, that we may need some reference in this, which could come after the assessor changes, to how those behavioral things happen, because that's a whole other discussion of how how kids are mainstreamed, but how do we identify triggers that are then repeated, that come out in bad behavior, and then get them into a better educational environment for those students. So that would be something, maybe not right now, but that we need to look at, because I think if we don't clarify that going forward, it looks like we have bad discipline everywhere. And as I've gone out and talked to a lot of teachers, and it's still the same uncomfortableness that the teacher has, but they understand the pathway has to be different for that child. But they need that solution. So that is going to take different paths for different circumstances, and we can't solve that and get our executive session done today. So, and we don't have all the information we need from the experts that we have identified from the community we want to hear from either. So I think I would be in fully favor of moving forward with the assessor and really taking the proper time and getting all of the information we need to back up our educators, because it's not just teachers, it's bus drivers, it's cafeteria workers, it's everybody who is trying to handle the challenges of behavior. And the superintendent and I had this discussion last week. Reset's the perfect word, and we're going to have to be the lead in reset, because this is indicative of society right now. I just came off of a weekend where people were intolerant on vacation of one another. How can you be intolerant when you're on vacation? So what? It takes you 10 minutes to get a drink. I mean, really, it's like, it was mind-boggling to me, the behavior that I saw, that we've just lost disrespect and grace for one another. So thank you.
Thank you. Can I get a clarification? I'm going to sound self-centered here, I know, but I don't know what the word for it is. Cell phones? Safety issue? Superintendent?
So, as an FYI, we do not allow cell phones at Positive Pathways at all. So when we're looking at that, that would have a direct impact if we're looking at global language within our district, and they, they are operating and have been operating in that fashion for quite a bit. And so that's one, and we could always, carve out Positive Pathways as an alternative site. And I do agree with comments Board Member Burden made about the cell phone, that until that parent comes, the cell phone is confiscated. I'm hoping recommendation might be that you don't have cell phones during the day. You have to have them in your backpack. And the last thing I need to clarify, I misspoke. As part of the contract, we email the link to the referrals to all teachers at the beginning of the year. That's not having it available on the internet because I have difficulty finding emails I got yesterday, let alone one that I would have gotten at the beginning of the school year. So we will put that online, but they do receive the link at the beginning of the year.
All right, thank you. Member Farrant?
I think just to touch base on the cell phones, right now in the policy, it states that there's, you can have a cell phone, but it cannot be out at all, correct? What is
Unless
the current?
it's part of the instruction and the teacher needs you to use it for part of their instruction.
Right. But to be out, to be on Instagram and texting friends, it's not allowed.
Or if the principal allows it.
Exactly. Okay. So what currently is the consequence if it's up to the principal, correct?
It's in
if they have it out and they shouldn't.
Actually, in the code, it gets confiscated and it doesn't get returned to the student until the parent comes and claims it.
Okay.
That's the
So you're wanting to revamp that so it doesn't state that.
Here's a thought. How about we schedule the rule development, which doesn't preclude us, even while we're scheduling that, perhaps while we're waiting for that, if we have the time and we can come back for another workshop and we take up these two issues and put some more flesh on the bones, which is a bad saying. Doesn't sound good. Flesh it out.
Can I just request clarification? Are we looking for a rule development workshop to just do the assessor changes so that we can talk about the other things?
I think that's where we are right this minute. Well, given the concerns that the superintendent just raised, I think we need to make a decision on how we're going to deal with Positive Pathways. I don't think we're prepared to do that here. So I think we move forward with the assessor. We schedule another workshop where we know that two specific things we're going to deal with is how we're going to address violence in particular, and how we're going to address cell phones, and with the benefit of hearing from our discipline task force and the superintendent with her ideas, the bigger picture of discipline. Okay? Are we good?
Yeah.
Okay.
Excellent.
Okay. I'm ready to adjourn before anybody pushes their button. Can we do that? Okay.
We are.
And remember, we have
Member Castor Dental, are you just messing with me? Okay.
We have an executive session in conference room.
Yes. All right. For the record, let me just announce that Member Vice Chair Gallo did have to depart from the meeting at 12:50. So let the minutes reflect that. Thank you.
Conference room meeting, don't forget. I need at least.
Yes.
Thank you. I was writing.